Already under fire, the Muslim Brotherhood's activities are now banned according to a court's decision. It's the latest move in the crackdown against the group since the military coup in Egypt. Just where does that leave the Brotherhood, and could it be excluded as a political roadmap is being drawn in Egypt? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fuli Batibo. An Egyptian court has suspended the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood and seized all of its assets. The decision doesn't affect the group's political wing, the Freedom and Justice Party, but it does now pave the way for police to arrest anyone taking part in Muslim Brotherhood protests. Let's just take a quick look first at Egypt's oldest and largest Islamic organization. The Muslim Brotherhood aims to mix political activism with charity work and has influenced movements with similar ideologies around the world. Operating under the slogan of Islam is the solution, the Brotherhood wants to create a state governed by Islamic law. Well, let's now bring in our guest for today's discussion. From London, Abdullah El Haddad is a spokesperson of the Muslim Brotherhood. In Doha, Abdullah Al Arian, assistant professor of history at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. And from Cairo via Skype, Zoher Sobky, a retired Egyptian army officer and political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you all for being on Inside Story today. Abdullah El Haddad in London, if I may begin with you, we understand that your lawyers are preparing an appeal to this court ruling to ban your activities. Are you hopeful that you can reverse this ban?
Well, we're trying to do our best to stay in the principles of justice. But it seems that this is corrupt military-backed judges that released Hosni Mubarak and released Ahmed Izz, the corrupted businessman, is now trying to silence the Muslim Brotherhood because of their peaceful involvement with the anti-coup alliance to resist this coup.
Do you see this ban having on your activities? Does this mean the end of street protests that we've been seeing for months now in Egypt, or is it business as usual for you?
Well, this decision, the Muslim Brotherhood will be always present on the street even after dissolving it. There are 2 points. The first point, as an NGO, the Muslim Brotherhood funded schools and hospitals, especially for the lower class and for poor people and sick people. This will affect and the consequences will be bad for this kind of schools and hospitals. The second point, this disbanding is just a start for anyone who is trying to oppose this coup. The Muslim Brotherhood is part of the anti-coup alliance. The anti-coup alliance has been peacefully protesting on the street for more than 90 days. The arresting of the anti-coup alliance figures, the arresting of all the people who are marching on the street started from the 3rd of July, which means there is nothing changed. It's just a jury decision, but the actual decision started from the day of the coup.
While Sobky in Cairo, if I can bring you in at this point, the perception by many people is that this decision and ruling is clearly an escalation by the Egyptian authorities to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood. Isn't this ruling likely to further inflame the current tensions in Egypt? What's your view?
Well, number one, I would like you to rephrase the introduction about the military coup. Armies are made to defend the people, and the army in Egypt has moved to defend the people. So if you have 45 million people in the streets asking the army to intervene, most people around the world now are convinced it's not a coup. Number one. Number two, if the gentleman from London is trying to question the integrity of the jurisdiction system in Egypt, well, the jurisdiction system around the world should be also questioned, because when a court passes a judgment to free Mubarak or Ahmed Izz, if it's against my conception, then it's corrupt. If it is in the line of my thinking, then it is not corrupt. The banning of the Muslim Brotherhood came after default of that society ever since that, let's say, what you call the Arab Spring, which I call the Arab Typhoon, happened in January. Things have been going down the drain. The Egyptian people have supported the Muslim Brotherhood with a 50-50 vote, and they misfunction.
But Mr. Sobky, you mentioned popular support. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned popular support, but isn't this a case perhaps that the new regime, the new leaders in Egypt are trying to use this popular support to try and justify a further clampdown and eliminate the Muslim Brotherhood from Egyptian society in a way that they previously couldn't do because now they have that popular support? Isn't that the case here?
Well, the popular support is what democracy needs. If popular support went against Hitler, the world would not have suffered. This guy, the Muslim Brotherhood, was acting in such a terrible way. I can name you fatal mistakes. We were going down the drain.
Abdullah El Haddad, I see you'd like to respond to that.
Yes, just 3 points. The first point, our fight is not with the army, is not with the police, is not with our own people. Our fight with the corrupted military junta, our fight with the deep state of Mubarak regime, our fight for anyone who is trying to counter our 25th of January revolution in the Arab Spring. The second point, he said 45 millions. I thought it was 33, and Tony Blair said 17 millions. And the numbers actually is not less than that. It's much lesser than that. It's not about the camera. It's not about the helicopter who is photographing the numbers on the street. It's about the ballot box. It's about the democratic process. It's the election decided who to win and who to lose. The third point, the Muslim Brotherhood has been existed for the Egyptian society for more than 85 years, involving in all kinds of social activities with all the people. That's what you get your legitimacy from. Now, this decision is not about the Muslim Brotherhood. This decision is about anyone who's trying to oppose this coup. First, they started with the Muslim Brotherhood, then it will end up to any political and social movement who is trying to oppose this military coup. We are not concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood, we are concerned about democracy and the future of democracy in Egypt.
Just to bring it back, though, to the Muslim Brotherhood, Abdullah Al Arian, in practice, the Muslim Brotherhood had almost been forced underground recently, with the arrests of thousands of its members, of its leaders. There is another court ruling, of course, another case that we're waiting for, looking at banning the Muslim Brotherhood altogether. Do you think it's just a matter of time before this organization is dissolved? Is that where we're heading?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is certainly an attempt to try and do that. But of course, if we look back at history, we know that the Muslim Brotherhood as an organization has existed for much of history as a banned organization. And clearly that hasn't affected its ability to bring out support from within Egyptian society, to establish institutions, to spread its message. And clearly I think what we're seeing now is an attempt to try and limit that, at least for the foreseeable future, in a way that perhaps was not possible under previous dictatorships. The reason, of course, is that the current military coup government is hoping that there's a cover of popular support around its ability to not only ban the organization through legal means and through these kinds of court decisions, but to actually take actions against it. And this is what we're seeing with this wave of arrests, with these mass killings, with the confiscation and destruction of property. All of these are meant as much as possible to limit at least the organization's ability to exist. But I think what we've seen also historically is that even if the organization itself is very debilitated, that the idea of the Muslim Brotherhood certainly is one that resonates with a very large segment of Egyptian society, and that's not something that's going away anytime soon. We see it in terms of the way that the Muslim Brotherhood has been able to mobilize support even outside of its organization. Many of the people that took part in the anti-coup protests, as I think was already mentioned, were not necessarily members of the Muslim Brotherhood. These are people who I think have shown that they're clearly uncomfortable with the idea of the military stepping in and removing an elected president, regardless of how unpopular that president may be, regardless of how his policies may have certainly failed the Egyptian people in some ways. But clearly it's setting a precedent in which this is a step backwards for democracy, to say the least. And at worst case, which is I think what we're seeing, it's clearly a step back toward the dictatorship of the prior period.
as you say, it's not the first time that the Muslim Brotherhood has been under pressure. Let's just take a look at how the organization has evolved. This is Egypt's oldest and largest Islamic organization. It was founded in 1928 by Imam Hassan al-Banna. It started as a religious and social organization, then evolved into a political group. In October 1954, the Muslim Brotherhood was blamed for a failed assassination attempt on then-President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The group was banned. Anwar Sadat succeeded Nasser in 1971. While he granted its leadership amnesties, the Brotherhood was officially banned again. When Hosni Mubarak came to power in 1981, he too kept a tight control on the Brotherhood, refusing to let it register as a political party. But 2011 was a turning point. After the fall of Hosni Mubarak, the Brotherhood founded its political arm, the Freedom and Justice Party. The party's candidate, Mohamed Morsi, was sworn in as Egypt's first democratically elected head of state. But the tide turned in July this year. After huge demonstrations, the army deposed Morsi and placed him under arrest. Mr. Sobky, if I can go to you now. At all levels, everyone, it seems, thinks that, you know, the new leadership in Egypt is basically trying to demonize the Muslim Brotherhood, that the Egyptian authorities are trying to marginalize this group. But can you envisage a transition to democracy, a political roadmap in Egypt without including the Muslim Brotherhood?
First of all, I'm not a politician, as you mentioned. I'm just an Egyptian retired civilian. What these gentlemen are really saying is funny, because I just live across the Rab'a al-Adawiyya, and I've seen exactly what happened through the demonstrations and the pickup under my house in Saura Street. They're distributing money and bribing the people, and there was not one single beggar on the streets of Cairo. These are all, yani, I don't want, I mean, I have to be a bit, 81 churches burned to the stake, people killed everywhere. The police station in Kardasa massacred like they do in Syria, cut throats. The guy was dying and asking for some water. And then if we want to challenge the integrity of the Egyptian army has 4,000 years behind it, not 80 years. Who are these people to come and question the Egyptian army? Hold on a second. That Minister of Defense, Mr. Sisi, what have they got around against him so that they would blame him and say corrupt? The guy gave Morsi several ultimatums, 48 hours, 96 hours. Please do this. Please. It's all on television. It's all in the media.
On the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood itself, Abdullah El Haddad, one of the criticism that's been leveled at you since the revolution in 2011 is that the Muslim Brotherhood hasn't had a clear legal status. Are you a religious group? Are you a political group? Nobody knows what your finances are. Nobody knows where the money comes from. And therefore, that this ruling is meant to put things in order, basically. What do you respond to that?
First, I would like to respond to the accusation that we have heard before. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi actually is not just corrupted man. He is a dictator. He is, compared to Hitler, he is someone who committed crimes against humanity to the Egyptian people, committing massacres in Rab'a and in Nahda and all Egypt against men and women or children.
But I'd really like to focus on the Muslim Brotherhood if we can, and the future of your organization.
Yes. The Muslim Brotherhood condemned all acts of violence. Violence is never justified. We only believe on the peaceful protesting on the street. The Muslim Brotherhood is an organization. It has so many wings. There is an NGO, there is political, as we have seen, it's the Freedom and Justice Party.
But isn't the problem that precisely, that it has so many different organizations and so many different agendas? Isn't that the issue today in Egypt?
No, it's not. It's only one agenda, and it's working for Egypt. As an NGO, As I told you, they were involved in social activities for the Egyptian people. As a political party, involved in the election, in the democratic process for the Egyptian people. That's what we are working for. Everyone knows what the Muslim Brotherhood are. Everyone knows how the Muslim Brotherhood work, how the organization work, where the money comes from, which actually comes from its own members.
Would the Muslim Brotherhood consider now, I guess, in light of all the latest developments in Egypt, would they reconsider its status perhaps, to restructure, perhaps just limit yourself to just being a political party? Because that seems to be an issue with a lot of Egyptians right now.
The Muslim Brotherhood is an idea, and you can't kill an idea. They tried before and they failed, and now they are trying again and they will fail. But our concern is not with the future of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood will always be present on the street for the Egyptian people. Our concern is the future of democracy in Egypt, for the democratic process, for the democratic institution. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi destroyed all hopes of democracy in Egypt, destroyed all principles of freedom and justice. This military junta has driven Egypt into a dark tunnel. We are part of this anti-coup alliance who are trying to resist them, who are trying to counter them by peacefully protesting on the street.
You say you're part of the anti-coup alliance, but would you be willing to take part in the current political process in Egypt? Would you be willing to get involved in drafting the new Egyptian constitution, for instance?
No, the only way now is to overthrow this coup and get back all of our democratic institutions. There is no democracy in Egypt now. There is only killing and murdering and torturing for the Egyptian people. This is not the country you have dreamt of. They are establishing a state of fear, a state of terrorism, a state of dictatorship.
But in order to change that, wouldn't it be better to get involved in the political process?
No, the only way to change that is to resist this coup by peacefully protesting.
Okay. Abdullah Arian, if I can bring you in, the Muslim Brotherhood are quite organized, it must be said, politically, whether you like it or not. Can they be excluded, even though they say they don't want to participate? Can they really be excluded from the political roadmap in Egypt?
Well, I think, we have to clarify the question. I don't think it's even a question that they've made the decision not to participate. I think the decision was already made for their exclusion before they even had that chance. As we saw the lead up to the violence that broke out after the 6 weeks of the sit-ins, there were negotiations that were very far along. They involved a number of different external parties, different governments were involved. The EU, of course, had the very high-profile visit by Catherine Ashton, and I think we saw that the results of those negotiations failed not because the Muslim Brotherhood had decided to boycott the process, but because on the other side they found that they had no partner that was willing to actually engage with them and to resolve the disputes as they stood. The reports, at least that we've seen from all of the international media at the time, suggested that a deal had been in place, and in fact many international actors, including U.S. officials, were quite shocked to see that the military instead chose the violence option to go and break up the sit-ins accordingly. So as a result, of course, I think there is a systematic effort to try and marginalize the organization, to exclude it from the process. When we consider, for instance, the fact is there is already a constitutional committee. It's already been selected. It's already at work right now revising the constitution. There is, of course, no representative from the Muslim Brotherhood. There's, in fact, almost no Islamist presence of any kind beyond kind of a token Salafi member who's sort of on this committee of 50 people. We're trying to see, at least now, an attempt, I think, by the current regime to really bring back the same politics of old, the same marginalization of independent political actors. And so this, I think, goes much further than the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't think this is simply about them as an organization, but of all of the different groups that stood together back in January and February of 2011 to try to overthrow this regime. They succeeded in getting rid of the dictator himself, Hosni Mubarak, but they certainly didn't succeed in getting rid of any other elements of the state.
Zoher, Sobky, what do you make of that? That basically all this, this idea of putting Egypt back in order is just an excuse to bring back remnants of the old regime.
You mentioned it in your question. The fact that these people are in a state of denial, that they don't want to admit the way they handled the country for 1 year, appointing a terrorist as the governor of one of the most beautiful, exotic, touristic cities in Egypt, and doing all these fatal mistakes one after the other. The Egyptians love the October War and feel that they have once won the war. They would get the guy who shot Sadat, the hero of that war, and become the guest of honor in the celebration of that ceremony. The people said enough is enough. And you know democracy.
But if Egypt is on a path to democracy, political freedom, we know, is a cornerstone of democracy. And this ruling puts that in doubt. I mean, this casts a shadow in the whole political process, in Egypt, doesn't it?
Well, of course, but the president of the Egyptian Republic is not a free man. He is a government employee, and he has to do exactly what the people want. He doesn't go against the people.
But the people, the Muslim Brotherhood still has a lot of supporters in Egypt today, as we've seen.
That's what they think. I live here in the city, and I have thousands of friends. My colleague in the office was arrested in one of the marches. I know this kind of people and this kind of people, but I tell you, the majority of the Egyptians, even the people who supported the Muslim Brotherhood, changed their minds. We are going down. We are going down the drain, and we are going down quickly.
Abdullah Al Arian, when the Brotherhood was driven underground back in the 70s, we saw the disgruntled backers resort to violence, and there was a rise in extremism in Egypt. Do you think we're likely to see a rise in militant Islamist movements as a result of this crackdown, because it must be called that, a crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you think this could result in factions, some factions within the Brotherhood, basically going underground and seeking more radical methods?
Well, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of discussion of that among, analysts and people who are observing the situation in Egypt. I think that's been overstated for a number of very important reasons, some historical and some that deal with the current political situation. I think what we saw in the 1960s and 70s was certainly a reaction to a climate that was already quite volatile, that had already had a legacy of revolutionary violence going all the way back to the 1940s and 50s. What we have now, I think, if you look at the last 20 or 30 years of the Muslim Brotherhood's history, clearly there's never been any efforts at all to indoctrinate any kind of militant philosophy or strategy. We certainly don't see it among the generation of youth. I mean, that simply just doesn't exist within the activist culture of the Muslim Brotherhood as it reconstituted itself in the 1970s. Most of those debates have long been resolved. Clearly, the militant option has never yielded any results at all for the Muslim Brotherhood. That's not to say that you won't have occasional bursts coming out from various other segments. We've seen it currently, of course, in Sinai most prominently, but that doesn't come out of the central philosophy or ideology.
But the organization nonetheless is experiencing organizational chaos. It's fragmented. Abdullah El Haddad, you have the last word in London. So where to next for the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you think you can survive this next round? And why not engage in the political roadmap to ensure the survival of this organization?
How do you ask us to engage in the political roadmap while just in the first day of this political roadmap they were prisoning all the Muslim Brotherhood figures and closing their TV channels and killing people on the street? This is not a democracy roadmap. This is a dictatorship roadmap. That's why the only solution to oppose this military coup is to keep marching on the street, peacefully protesting on the street, to resist this coup and get back the 25th of January revolution against Mubarak. It's been 90 days since the coup. There were no act of violence. We have condemned any act of violence. No violence is ever justified. This is not the first time that were decision against us to dissolve us. We will never believe, the only thing we believe on is the democracy and the way of protesting, peacefully protesting to achieve principles of freedom and justice, the way that Mandela did, the way that Gandhi did.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave the discussion there. Thank you all for being on Inside Story today. Abdullah El Haddad, Abdullah Al Arian and Zoher Sobky. And thank you very much for joining us on this program. If you want to send us your feedback, as always, just email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching.